Sionagad, Brian Bawatauto, Talik Janel, Tosco Sud, Yawadatiad, Utanjun Delthquas, Dagilastane, Jijalgi. Hello everyone, my name is Brian. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Talco, Oklahoma, and I work here at Northeastern State University. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 48th Annual Symposium on the American Indian. This session is titled Advancing Indigenous Knowledge, Formation of a Tribal Research Department, and we'll be joining Dr. Celia Stall-Meadows of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. As you probably know, this session is one of many that are included in this year's virtual agenda. Please do take time to visit our website at nsuok.edu/symposium for more details regarding the agenda. All sessions will be recorded and made available in the weeks ahead. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our presenter for this session, Dr. Stall-Meadows. She has decades of university teaching experience, including right here at Northeastern State University, as well as Oklahoma State University and Indiana Tech. She has authored dozens of research articles as well as university textbooks. She has been a tribal researcher since coming to the Choctaw Nation in 2016 and was tasked with creating a tribal research department and hiring co-op students from local universities to gain experiential learning. Her goal is to prepare the students as future leaders who have promising career opportunities and a desire to remain in Southeast Oklahoma, working for the tribe upon graduation. She is a proud member of the Choctaw Nation. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Stall-Meadows.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming and attending. I do have a long history with NSU. I taught there for more than 2 decades, and I really loved the campus and just the people that I worked with, and some of them are still there. So those that have been there for 30 years probably I've met. And anyway, it's good to be back virtually. So the title of my presentation is, oops, let me go back up. The title of my presentation is Advancing Indigenous Knowledge. And specifically, it's about this process that we have gone through to create a tribal research department at the Choctaw Nation. Today, our topics will cover purpose of a tribal research department, because a lot of smaller tribes may not have an individual research department. The goals for our tribal research department, just sort of explaining what a tribal research department does, how it functions, where we are. Surprisingly, we're in IT, so I am the I part of IT. Why is tribal beneficial, or why is tribal research department beneficial to a tribe? We'll talk about the benefits of having one, and just the general question we will answer, which is, how does a tribal research department advance Indigenous knowledge? So those are the topics that we'll cover. I will say I'm an educator. If you have a question, Sarah, if somebody poses a question and wants an answer, I'll be happy to stop and go down a different rabbit hole or on a different tangent briefly. So. Okay, the purpose and goals of tribal research. We created kind of a mission statement. This has not been an easy journey. It has been an evolution, not a revolution. So the purpose of the Tribal Research Department is to conduct scientific research for the tribe that allows leadership to make value-rich and data-driven decisions. And that is across the board. I mean, that is an important part of the tribe, is to make those data-driven decisions. So we're here to help. I will cover each one of these goals on subsequent slides, but real quickly, we will serve as a researcher for the tribe and research point of contact for other people who are conducting research and need assistance. We will conduct our own original research. We will work with outside researchers who are conducting research for the tribe. Second goal, disseminate research findings. And what I'm doing today is an example of disseminating research findings. And it's really important for any of us in academia to try to make opportunities to serve the broader knowledge base by presenting either at conferences like this or publishing articles. But certainly that needs to be woven into your tribal research department goals. And thirdly, develop research capabilities throughout the tribe. So I'm an educator. I'll never be able to get that out of my blood, but so training, you teach a man to fish. You don't just give them fish. So we do this daily, teaching departments how to create surveys or teaching them how to analyze data, teaching them just basics of Excel functions. And we're always trying to work to make our associates that work for the tribe more knowledgeable so that we can advance knowledge. And we do a lot of data analyses too. So Sarah, any questions so far that you want me to cover? She's on mute.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Doctor. So
Okay.
I will keep you posted.
Okay, well, it's Sarah's picture, but I guess it's Brian that I'm talking to.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. It's okay. All right, next slide. How does a tribal research department market its services within the tribe? And I just summarized that by saying we created a menu. I used to teach marketing, so I'm always thinking about presentation or how to disseminate information. And so I used one of the co-ops who was pretty tech savvy and created an a la carte menu. And we created these categories of common requests that we get in our department, and then some of the actionable steps that some department might need. So what are the benefits to the tribe? First, our goal has always been to help associates to think about data collection on the front end. So often it's kind of an afterthought where, a program, they're creating maybe a new program for tribal member services and well, we want to do this and we want to offer these kinds of services and maybe we want to, create this elaborate program. But the question is always those formative and summative evaluations. So you have to be thinking about evaluation on the front end because that is going to help you determine how you are, or what you're going to measure and make sure that that it is measurable. So you can't just say, well, I want, students to learn more about coding or computing in this 2-week workshop. Well, what do you want them to know about coding or computing? So that's where we come in is to try to help them. Maybe they have to do a pre-test and a post-test on, basic terminology so that you can measure where the students were when you first started your program versus where they are when you finish the program. So that's a important part of what we do, and it benefits the tribe because then the department has data that they can use to support their request for next year's program, which is expanded or bigger and better. So we use a lot of descriptive statistics to use for our data. Secondly, we help our departments answer their own question, how can we measure program outcomes? I just addressed that. Because you just can't stand up a program without thinking about how you're going to justify the budget request for the next fiscal year. So they may give you the money to try it, but you're going to have to show them that you were successful. So how can we measure program outcomes? Third, we've learned, and this was one of those findings that we weren't even aware of when we first established the Tribal Research Department. But there's this market of young, what I would call novice researchers. And a lot of them have been tribal members. And so they'll just reach out to us or reach out to like the language department and say, hey, I'm a junior at this high school, or I'm a senior, or I'm a junior in college, and I want to do a research project on first language speakers. And that's oftentimes like all they know at that point. I mean, generally they've done a little bit of research on it, but our job is to help them navigate the Choctaw Nation. I mean, it's huge. And we oftentimes can pick up the phone and just call somebody that we know over in the language department. And before we ever reach out, back out to that student, we'll just say, hey, what do you think about this idea that they want to do? Do you think that's something that you would have time for? Really, I think we're all in agreement at the tribe that we want to help our tribal members in any way we can. And as researchers, we need to be fostering the notion of being good researchers, following scientific research principles. And we really want to help our tribal members because they, especially young people, I mean, they are the future, and we need to be there to serve them and to direct them and guide them in best practices that benefit the tribe, the indigenous population, rather than just, a standard expectation of the research. So anyway, we have learned that there's an underserved market, and that's these young people that want to do research. They come in thinking that research is like this black box, but when they come out of it, they realize that it's a step by step, it's a prescribed set of steps that you follow in conducting research. And it's fun to be able to watch the light bulbs come on with those students. So that's one. And then another benefit to the tribe, the leadership will contact the tribal research department for guidance on measuring outcomes, evaluating assessment tools, conducting research, just whatever they need. And I'll give you an example. We have we're working on a financial literacy program, and without going into a lot of details on it, there is an evaluation instrument that my department was asked to look through just to see if the questions were, not too difficult, the reading level was right. And so we evaluated the actual instrument itself, and that's one of the things that we've been working on, but there's a lot of others. So just a lot of kind of opportunities for conducting research or helping foster research within the tribe, and that oftentimes will fall to the tribal research department. It grows. You start out looking for work, and then pretty soon it becomes, how are we going to manage to get all these projects done? But that's been a really fun part of growing the department. And then the last benefit to the tribe is this opportunity to be preemptive, and it saves a whole lot of time when, let's say I get a call from special services and they're doing a survey of community center uses, because we have a community center in every one of the counties. And they want to know like how we might implement more IT kinds of strategies in the community centers. So typically these people that are running the departments are more of a hands-on, a people kind of a service-oriented department. And it just helps them because, when you teach, you learn that like 90% of all your students are visual learners. And so if you will just create a survey for them, it may not even be exactly what they wanted, but it gives them an opportunity to see it and know where they can start from. So I've always advocated giving students as much, or giving departments as much information as you can, so that they can visually imagine what you're talking about when you say, I'm doing a survey. The first goal is to serve as researchers and a research point of contact. So I listed some specifics under that. Number one, we conduct both quantitative and qualitative research. And I'll give you an example of those in a moment. But we do a lot of, when we do surveys, a lot of that data, those are quantitative data points. And you'll see in a slide or two, numbers are important, obviously, in tribal research departments. But we also conduct qualitative research, and we publish original research. So for example, we have a summer school, a remedial summer school program. And we evaluated the leaders. So we conducted in-depth interviews with current and past leaders of this summer school program, and then did a thematic analysis and sort of developed these major overarching themes that we could use. And we are working on articles that we're submitting to journals about that particular original research. So that's important. I mean, we don't always get to do original research, but I like it when you do. It's fun. So a lot of what we do is to conduct research projects in response to other departments' requests for data collection. So I need to know, how many of our tribal members would take advantage of this service, or I need to know what would be the best way to spend the money in this department. So we do a lot of that. We confer with the managers. Communication is probably the number one thing that we do. Spend a lot of time picking up the phone and calling. It's easy to dash off an email, but sometimes you really, really need to just pick up the phone and call, because in our tribe, which is no different than anybody else's tribe, it's all about the relationships, and you make relationships and you foster relationships through that voice or face-to-face when that allows. We also identify how previously collected data might serve department needs. And I see there's somebody that has raised a hand. Brian, can you read what that person asked or wants to comment?
This is Gentry. We have a couple of questions that some people ask. We have, will this be shared as a PDF is the first question.
How do you guys do that? I'm not sure. Gentry, can you answer that question for her? Him?
Yes, you can email it to us.
You can email it to us, and then we can send it out if you want to do that.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
What's the other question?
The next question is, how big is your staff?
So it's getting ready to increase. Started out with me by myself, and then I hired a research scientist 3 who came from grants. And now we have 2 more research assistants, and we're getting ready to hire a another co-op student or a co-op student who will come from Southeastern probably. So we're growing, and our workload is growing. So I think we're in a good position to request more, but for now, it's just the 4 of us, getting ready to be 5 when we hire that next co-op. Any other questions?
That looks like it's it for now.
So that's 500% increase. That's a lot for me. Okay. But it's very manageable. I mean, it's, with 5 people in the department, it won't be too difficult. And my research scientist 3 serves, she's really good with assisting. So, all right, the next bulleted point, guide departments in best practices. So, you may want to ask this type of question, but for example, we did a survey for the community centers, and I said, it would be really, I know you're not thinking about it now, but it would really be nice if we knew the age range of these people, because maybe the types of services that they need can be correlated with whatever age group they're in. And I said, you won't be sorry that you asked that one demographic question, or maybe there are a couple of them. So we do make recommendations. We partner with universities on research projects. Most recently, well, there's been a couple of them, but I'm trying to work with Southeastern down in Durant because it's right in our back door of the Choctaw Nation. And so they've been really responsive to helping with all kinds of research. And we've tried to work with them on maybe proposing some ideas for research. But we also worked with Oklahoma State University, and that has been a good partnership. They did some work for us, and we were real pleased with that. So wherever we need access, and I also might mention I'm on the institutional review board for the tribe, and we work with a lot of professional researchers like academic your college professors that conduct research at comprehensive research institutions like OU. So the tribe itself works with a lot of external researchers. And because I'm on the IRB, I get to hear about those as well. Third from the bottom, foster relationships with managers. As I said before, it's all about the relationships. Serve as a tribal liaison for tribal member students conducting research. I did mention that one already. And that's a fun one because I love teaching. I love teaching young people. I love helping them, learn this new process of conducting scientific research, that it's not a black box, that you don't just put stuff in and it just comes out. You really have to make it work. And that's fun. And then seeking grant funding is something that we have been working on. And just this morning, I shared a grant opportunity for IT. So that's another area. Goal number 2, disseminate. You don't just conduct research and then keep it close to the vest because it's your baby and you love it. No, your job, part of what makes research a research is that it has that shareability. So that's why it's so important to present at conferences. That's why it's so important to publish in research journals, because you can't make the world a better place if you don't share your hard work that you've done. So anyway, we provide research summary reports internally. So if you've done a survey, if you're a department in our tribe that you've done a survey, we'll send you a summary report. And I'll show you a picture of one here in just a minute of colorful bar charts and pie charts and graphs and all kinds of stuff that describe the statistics that are in there. Then the third sub-bullet under goal number 2 is to analyze data and create data visualizations. We did the State of the Nation's Health, and we took their health data and just made it colorful and made it visual and then sent it back to them. And they used a lot of that in their health report. Ensure dissemination of appropriate data that will enhance awareness of the tribe, including conference presentations and academic publications. And finally, we use Microsoft Office and all the stuff that goes with it. And so one of the things we have to do in tribal research is to always be learning new software, learning new applications. We, investigate everything. And that's been the really nice thing about our research assistants is they're so eager to learn, and it's like an onion. They just keep peeling back all the layers until they get to the core so we can see what it is and compare, apples to apples. So onions and apples. Okay, and Power BI is one of the dashboards that we use. Here's an example of one that we did. We just took I'm not even sure who created the survey, but we just put it in a dashboard, and you can see how colorful it is. And I did happen to see some document that came from some of the higher leadership where they had quoted something out of this dashboard. So somebody was reading it. But this is an interactive. Some of you may use other types of database visualization, but this is one of them. I like it. And if it wasn't a static image, you could hover over whatever color and it would pop out on all the other. So like if I said, is your spouse a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma? And I hovered over the blue, then anywhere that spouse, somebody who had responded with spouse, that would show up in one of these other pie charts. So it's kind of nice. Our third goal is to develop research capabilities throughout the tribe. And, they all sort of start to cross lines, but specifically we provide training. We provide recommendations. A lot of research has to go through the Institutional Review Board, or maybe it doesn't, but we try to steer everybody toward the IRB that the tribe runs, because a tribal IRB is a little bit different, at least our tribal IRB is a little different than just a university IRB. A university IRB is concerned with protection of human subjects. Well, a tribal IRB is concerned with protection of human subjects, but they're also concerned with protection of heritage and culture. So, you know, you have probably, if you have been involved in social science research, you may have seen examples of really bad research. And some of it was using human subjects for, you know, ill reasons, but other times it's a little more subtle than that, where it might just be a bit disparaging to a particular group. And so our IRB, which I serve on, has editorial review to make sure that our tribal members or Native Americans in general are not viewed in a negative light. And so we have editorial review over that. And if you want to do research with tribal members, you have to comply in that respect. So it is a little bit grayer maybe than just a, you know, basic human subjects research option. Okay, serve as a repository for survey questions. I'll just show you the next slide. We use Microsoft Forms, which is I wouldn't call it free, but it's free with a paid subscription to Microsoft. And these are just, 16 of hundreds of surveys that I've created. But the good news is they are all in my account, so I can see them and I can go back and I can say, oh yeah, I remember we did a survey like that. Here is one, and I can put together a survey pretty fast because I have that, that institutional knowledge. If I have time, maybe I'll have the co-op do this when we hire, is have them catalog all of the survey questions. Unfortunately, right now they're in my head, or whomever I've shared with, but that is on my to-do list. Okay. Suggest using validated survey instruments when applicable. We use the American Community Survey. We try to, like, if there's a question about like a demographic, level of education or age range or ethnicity or whatever it is we want to ask, we try to go to the ACS and use their questions, because two reasons. One, we know that they didn't just make those questions up lightly. They did a lot of research and a lot of vetting of those. But two, it gives us a place to compare to. So if our age groups are 35 to 44 and 45 to 54 and 55 to 64, I know that I can compare to the census data and see how we compare or are different or similar. So we do try to use other people's works. That's what you do in research. Okay, we do a lot of writing. If somebody asked me what I did for a living, I'd say, well, I read and I write. That's basically my job. But it's more than that. I communicate, I analyze, a lot of other things. But a big part of it is not everybody's a great writer. So if you are a good writer and you have always been able to think linearly, that seems to be the best way in this business to write, you should consider a career path in technical writing, whether it's for a private company or whether it's in a research department, because it is a skill set that not that many people have honed. Two, if you are the person that reads everything, you should be in the tribal research department, because you'll be a valued member of the team, because reading is as important as being able to write. You don't want to overlook anything. When I read a document, I'm always the educator in me is like, okay, there's going to be at least 3 typographical errors in here, and I'm not going to be satisfied until I find something that needs to be fixed. That's the kind of person that you probably want in your research department. Mentoring is another area that the Tribal Research Department does, and I've talked about novice researchers, and I actually have written a paper and submitted it to a World Congress on Education, I think is the name of the organization, but I'm hoping to get to present about this process that we did of creating a bit of a streamlined IRB process for students that come in that have 1 semester to do work. I mean, our IRB typically deals with professional researchers, and they have studies that go on for years sometimes. So they have all the time, not all the time in the world, but they have a lot of extra time. Well, you get a college student has a 1 semester capstone project, and that college student has to, check all these IRB boxes and do all of this stuff. And it's just, it won't work with the current system that we have in place. So we've been working on a system, and that's something that hopefully we'll be able to implement soon. Guide researchers concerning data privacy and IRB approval requirements. It helps that my research scientist 3 used to be the IRB administrator, and that I currently serve on the board. So the 2 of us have a lot of knowledge about the Choctaw Nation's IRB. Next to last bullet, serve on data research related committees and boards. Besides the IRB, I've been on the Data-Driven Decision Committee. I've been on the Data Governance Committee. So we try to serve on areas that, at our tribe, there's not a whole lot of committee work. It's not like at a university. I mean, at the university, in SU, you have to be on 2 committees a year, and but it's different at the tribe, but you just help out wherever. Then you stay abreast of technologies and trends associated with data collection, privacy analysis, and data visualizations. So that's the 3rd goal. Here is some of those many, many surveys that are in the Microsoft Forms account. Got to make sure I stay on time. So a recap. How does a tribal research department advance Indigenous knowledge? Because that was the burning question of this presentation. And I've talked around some of these or specifically addressed, but I'm going to ask you guys maybe to think up something that I've overlooked. So first, we serve as internal educators. And, if somebody else was in charge of a tribal research department, not me, then they may not be an educator by profession. But I feel like that has been one of the benefits to me of running this department, is that we are in the business of training people so that they can make better decisions. Secondly, providing a path for departments to make data-driven decisions. So we got to give them the tools so that they can collect the data, so they can make the right decisions and not be targeting the wrong groups when in fact it's this group, this age group, or this gender, or this whatever that uses the services the most. Sometimes it's hard. We've often had the discussion, it's hard to put a value, quantify something like safety or security, but it can be done, and you just have to be really creative with your surveys or interviews or whatever method of data collection. We work with universities on research projects. I already talked about that. That's been a really good, since I have a university background, I've already had some contacts at the various universities, and that's been good. Applying for or recommending grants that build research capacity. So that is a common phrase, building research capacity. And you will see that in grants that come out. So there's a lot of research capacity grants, and we that just means like making it so that the tribe can better conduct its own research, or that like just establishing a tribal research department is a functioning one, is building research capacity for the tribe. Because you as the tribal representative are surrounded by all these people doing all these things for tribal members all day long, and you're understanding why we do what we do and what our core values are, and it just builds research capacity. The more knowledge you have, the better able you are to serve your tribe. Actively directing original research that's valuable to the tribe. So I put this in there, and I don't want to say that outside researchers don't do some really great things for the tribe, because they do. I mean, on IRB, I see these surveys and all these research protocols that come through that are just amazing, health related, looking at type 2 diabetes, or looking at smoking cessation, or looking at healthful eating, or promoting exercise. I mean, we have all of those things come through. Some of them are internal, like they may come from our health, our pharmacists that work at the clinic, or they may come from some of the doctors, but others come from universities. So I have always enjoyed working with those, and they do a great job. And generally they're experienced researchers, and it's no problem to get their protocols through the IRB. But we have another group of people that are those of us at the tribe that maybe don't have that experience. So we help navigate that, and we encourage internal research, because we feel like that builds research capacity. Anytime you're increasing someone's knowledge, you're helping, sovereignty and building research capacity. That's important. And we do really want to foster research that is tribe, that has been, the agenda is set by the tribe. That's something that we're working toward. And so that's why we are conducting original research and publishing that, because that is by tribal members for the tribe, and kind of, shares the Native American perspective. Then lastly, and I've said this before, sharing knowledge. So my question for you guys, if you don't have other questions, is what are some other ways that a tribal research department could advance Indigenous knowledge besides maybe these that are listed? Anybody have any suggestions? Something I might have overlooked? I can't tell, Brian, if there are questions or comments in the chat, but I can keep going if I need to.
We do have one question. Oh, I lost it. Give me 1 second. It says, is your team involved in providing research for the business side of the tribe, like gaming industry trends?
That's a good question. So I primarily work with member services, but we also work with integrated services, which is one of the big divisions. And we are working with health. I do know that our commerce side, that's what we call it, the gaming and things, have their own wonderful staff of data analysts and researchers, and they work with a company that does a lot with user experiences. So that seems to not just user experiences, but even tribal member experiences. So they do a lot of that, and they do have their own team. We have shared a lot of things back and forth, but really commerce has their own staff. And there is a huge amount of workload with the other departments. We have the legal department, and we're talking about some possible collaborations with them. Any other questions, Brian?
I see that a participant said in the chat that they suggested university outreach and working with Native grad students. And I see that you have working with universities on research projects, but I think it is important to distinguish, working with institutions themselves versus the students, what you've kind of talked about working with students quite a bit.
You know what? That was a great point that the participant made. Let me just give you an example. And I don't even know why I didn't say this. We have worked a lot with Native American graduate students. They probably exceed our undergrads and our, secondary ed students. We worked with one, she was a doctoral student working on her dissertation in Colorado, and she did a presentation, or she did a data collection on our rewards program for like perfect attendance or straight A's or A's and B's. So she analyzed quantitative data about the students that participate in that, and then she followed it up with interviews, and it's really a good dissertation project. So we worked with her on that, and then we're working with another student right now on interviewing, kind of just more of a general experience, I guess, about students in higher education and whether or not they feel connected with the Native American programs that are at the different institutions. So yes, graduate students are, I don't want to say more fun to work with, but they do some great work, and we get to work with them, just about every one of them. So I didn't even mention that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything
Awesome.
else?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So when I think about, research, it's, a lot of times it's a very, kind of Western, kind of rigid framework sometimes. And even here at NSU, when we engage in research, sometimes, there's this growing evolution of Indigenous research methodologies, understanding that knowledge isn't owned or discovered, it's to be shared, And so I'm wondering, how, in your experience working with your tribe's IRB and working with students, is that a discussion that comes up, talking about, Indigenous research methodologies and what it means to be an Indigenous researcher?
That's a really profound question, Brian. Good job on that. Let me just tell you with an example. So I was earlier mentioning that we did research with the remedial summer school program, and we interviewed all of the directors, past and present, of this remedial program. And what we learned was that storytelling is a major theme within our tribe. And one of the things you also learn is to hedge about saying, well, all Indigenous tribes think that storytelling is important, because that may not be the case. But it is an important part of our tribal culture. And much of the transcription or transcribed document that we had from those leaders was like, well, let me tell you this story. And I think we all do that, but it seemed to be a story of success. Like, you have the quantitative measures, which what you would call westernized measures of, okay, here was the test score at the beginning of the summer school program. Here's the test score at the end of the summer school program. Look how much progress they made. It's amazing. Like, these kids who were scoring below the 40th percentile are now on their post tests are scoring almost at the same level or at the same level as the kids that never qualified for this program, this summer learning program, because they were already reading at grade level. So that's quantitative. And that's an amazing piece of data that you want to share with people. It's very prescriptive. I mean, this is pre and post test, but it's this storytelling part that's been very fun to do, because that's not always the case. And we've attended, that's one of the things we do a lot, is to attend other Native American researchers' presentations. And there's a young lady that is very, I'll just mention her name. Her name is Abigail Echohawk. And she is, if you haven't ever heard her give a presentation, she makes you really feel good about your own, method of research and how it is different. And she talks a lot about storytelling as a data source, really. So does that answer your question, Brian?
It absolutely does. I appreciate the perspective.
Yeah, so both, you can do both.
Awesome. I'm not seeing it. Oh, wait. Oh, okay. We got another question. How does your function interact with Ryan Springs group? How does your group interact with Ryan Springs Historic Preservation Department?
Okay. So Ryan is over in cultural. I've been to some of Ryan's presentations. He's super entertaining and he does a lot of grants. So I'm familiar with kind of what he does, but it has been less working with Ryan's group, but Audrey, who is in cultural education, is working on, so she's in cultural with Ryan, but she handles working with the public schools, creating curriculum and videos and things that are promote kind of the arts, I guess, the cultural arts of the Choctaw Nation. And we just started working with Audrey's group and talking about doing pre and post tests, but they're writing a lot of curriculum. So, there are lots and thousands of employees at the Choctaw Nation, but the headquarters, which is where a lot of us work, we have many interactions, especially before the pandemic when we had to, put a damper on things. So I'm looking forward to seeing people at Roots Cafeteria and just chatting across the table. And that is something that we've really missed, that communication element. Any other questions?
No, I'm not seeing any more questions right now. You got
Okay.
a lot of engagement, though. This was a lot of questions for your session.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So let me just say one last thing. You may be a great writer and you may be a great reader, but the other piece that comes in very handy is an understanding of Excel and an understanding of basic statistics. Now, when you work for the tribe, you don't have to be the statistician. You can actually hire the services of a statistician to help you with some of the more difficult passages. But as a graduate student, I had to take my statistics course for my master's degree, and then I had to take more statistics courses for my doctorate. But I'm not a statistician. But I understand like where things happen and the process. I got A's in all my stat courses, but I don't use it often enough. So I do have people that are really good at that we have on staff or access to. So you don't have to make an A in stats. You don't have to be a math major to be successful in a tribal research department. It helps to understand it, but as long as you know where you can go to get help, that's what's important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's something we tell our students every day is, number one, go to class. Number two, don't be afraid to ask for questions and don't be afraid to ask for help. It's all part of being a constant learner.
Right. Lifelong learner. That's what you want to be, even if you don't go back and get your master's degree or your doctorate. But I will just put in a plug for a master's degree. It's just not that much time out of your lifespan. I would encourage you to consider that in any area. But research, it doesn't matter what area you go into, research is important in academics. And if you have the opportunity to write a master's thesis or take extra coursework, please consider writing the master's thesis if you think there's ever a chance that you might want to be involved in research. And I say that because it gives you this skill set that you need to move into positions like this.
Yeah, I feel like you're talking directly to me. I'm currently considering grad
I
school,
was.
so I appreciate the words of encouragement. Well, thank you, Yakoki, Baton, for joining us today. We really appreciate everything you had to share.